Hello everyone and welcome back to Cherry Lanes, where today we're going to go through how to make two variations of my Honey-Cocoa Gingerbreads with no ginger. I remember being little and not being able to appreciate spiced cookies and treats, so I thought I'd adapt a classic gingerbread into a honey cocoa flavoured one instead. So if you prefer a richer cocoa flavour in your cookies, follow this yummy recipe that will be demonstrated. But if you prefer a stronger honey flavoured cookie with a mild cocoa flavour, so it's a little bit sweeter and doesn't have much bitterness from the cocoa, I recommend you make the second variation, which is personally what I prefer, and I will explain how to make that variation in this video. Alright, enough talking and let's get straight into it. You will need 3.5 cups, which is 420 grams of plain flour, a quarter cup plus 2 tablespoons of Dutch processed cocoa powder, which is 40 grams that I used, 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking soda, a quarter teaspoon of baking powder, half a teaspoon of salt, 3/4 of a cup, which is 168 grams of softened unsalted butter at room temperature, half a cup plus 1 teaspoon of firmly packed dark brown sugar, which is 133 grams that I used, 1 large egg, 1 teaspoon of pure vanilla extract, and finally half a cup, which is 172 grams of pure honey. And if you're like me and you prefer a stronger honey to cocoa flavor instead, simply replace the 40 grams of cocoa powder with plain flour and add 2.5 tablespoons of cocoa powder and follow the exact same process that will be demonstrated. So, in a large or medium mixing bowl, start by adding your plain flour, cocoa powder, baking soda, baking powder, and salt, and give it a good mix until all of the dry ingredients are evenly incorporated, turning the bowl around as you go along, ensuring you get all of the sides and the middle thoroughly mixed in, and it should look something like this. In a separate large mixing bowl, give your softened at room temperature butter a quick mix, and my butter is a little bit firm because I was a bit impatient, but start on a low setting until it starts to cream up a little and increase it to a medium speed till your butter looks nice and creamy like this. Now pop in your firmly packed dark brown sugar and start on a low speed until your butter and sugar starts to come together, where it should look something like this. Now you bring the speed up to about a medium to high speed. Here I'm using speed 5 out of a maximum of 9, and you beat that for about 2 to 3 minutes until light and fluffy. Now add in your egg and beat that on a medium speed for about a minute until just incorporated, scraping down the sides and the bottom as you go along, and it should feel light and airy and look something like this. Now simply add in all of that delicious honey and the vanilla extract, and starting on a low speed till it starts to come together, then increase your speed to a medium to high speed. Here I'm using speed 4 out of 9, and mix that for about 3 minutes until your mixture looks thick and smooth but still feels light and airy. To that, add in half of your dry ingredient mix and carefully fold it into your wet ingredients until it starts to come together and look something like this. And then now you add in the rest of your dry ingredients and you keep folding it in gently. Where you can see I like to cut through the middle, and sometimes I give it a quick smush and then I fold over and under and over and under. And you just keep doing that as the mixture gets quite thick and firm, and you might need to use a little bit of muscle at this stage, and you know it will be done when it looks thick and sticky with no more streaks of flour left inside. Now, prepare 2 large sheets of baking paper on a chopping mat or tray of any sort, and separate your Honey-Cocoa Gingerbread dough into 2 parts like so, and cover with another sheet of baking paper. Now, roll it out till it's approximately 1/2 centimeter thick, or about a tiny bit less than 1/4 of an inch, and fold in all of the corners of the baking paper so the dough won't ice up too much while freezing. If you rolled it out a little bit too wide and you can't fold the baking paper, just cover it roughly with some cling wrap and then stick it in the freezer for about 8 minutes until slightly firm but not frozen. If you skip this freezing step, it's going to be impossible for you to cut out your cookie shapes. So once it's done firming up in the freezer, simply press out your cookie shapes firmly. You can smack it down like this if you want. And if you're lucky, your cookie will lift off with your cookie cutter shape, and you can just simply plop it down and place it on your prepared baking tray. Ensure you leave a good amount of space between each cookie, as they will spread just a little bit while baking. So if your cookies are stuck on the baking paper, simply peel off the offcuts and use an angled spatula, or here I'm just using this frying spatula, to help me lift off my cookie dough. If you're cutting a cookie shape that has smaller points of attachment to its main part, like these reindeer ears here, make sure that you scrape under each point, like this, before you lift it all up, or you might risk breaking your cookie dough. So now you just bunch off all the offcuts that you've pulled off, and just repeat the whole process of rolling it out again and freezing it slightly before cutting it out, until you use up all of your cookie dough, which should get you about 18 regular-sized gingerbread men. Now, before baking each batch, cover your cookies with some plastic wrap and refrigerate for about 8 to 10 minutes until cold. It's really important for you to bake the cookies while they are cold, or they will spread more than they should. So if they are cold, this will ensure that your cookies will maintain its shape as much as possible. Ensure your oven is preheated to 175 degrees Celsius and bake that for 7 minutes, then bring the temperature down to 145 degrees and bake that for another 4 minutes in the middle section of your oven. You'll know that your Honey-Cocoa Gingerbreads are done when you gently press the middle of your cookie down and it springs back up like this. So now remove your cookies and let them cool on the tray as they continue to bake while they cool down, before you transfer them onto a cooling rack. If you're making these cookies in advance, you can freeze them for up to 3 months before decorating, and I'll leave more freezing, storing, and defrosting information in the description below. Now, once your cookies are completely cool, let's decorate them with some meringue powder-based royal icing instead of using fresh egg whites, so that these cookies can last longer and we will completely eliminate any slight risk of salmonella. So, to make the meringue powder-based royal icing, you will need 1/4 cup of meringue powder, or egg white powder, which is 35 grams that I used, 1/2 cup of lukewarm water or room temperature water, which is 112 grams, and finally 450 grams of icing sugar, also known as powdered or confectioner's sugar, plus another 1/2 cup or so extra icing sugar so that we can make the border icing later on. Now, in a large or medium mixing bowl, start by sifting all of the icing sugar by tapping your sift against your hand like so, and pushing through all the remaining clumps with the back of a spoon. Now, in a separate large mixing bowl, pour in your meringue powder and your warm water and give it a quick stir until slightly dissolved like this. Now, starting on a low speed, beat until just foamy and then increase it to a medium speed of 3 out of a maximum of 9 that I'm using here, and beat that for about 1 minute until your mixture looks something like this. To that, sift in again about 1/3 to 1/2 cup of icing sugar at a time, just to really ensure that your royal icing is going to be super smooth with no clumps at all inside. And mix that on a medium speed until well incorporated, always ensuring that you scrape down the sides as well as you can between each addition. Once all of your icing sugar is incorporated, mix on high, I'm using a speed of 5 here, for about a minute until your mixture looks smooth and glossy, and here you've got the perfect flood icing consistency. Pour about half of that mixture into a small bowl and set that aside as your flood icing. And for your border icing, gradually sift in another 1/2 cup plus about 1/8 cup more icing until you achieve a consistency that feels slightly thicker than mayonnaise. And as you see here, when you drip the icing back, its ribbons sort of take a few seconds before fading back into the mixture. Now, for the fun and creative part of deciding what colors you'll need to decorate your cookies, I'm going for quite basic designs because I still have a lot of work to do to get better at decorating cookies, but I usually just ensure that I have at least a white, red, and some black border icing ready to use. So flood icing is what gives these cookies its smooth, shiny finish, and border icing is what keeps flood icing in its lane. So ensure each layer of icing is completely dry, which should take about 20 minutes before you pipe on the next layer. Like when you pipe on the ice that you can see here, all your decorations will merge together if the bottom layers are not completely dry. Anyway, these delicious honey-cocoa gingerbreads have a firm, bread-like texture like a gingerbread should, instead of a crunch like butter cookies would, but the dried royal icing will give them a little bit of a crisp. So this is what it looks like from the inside after you take a bite out. It's just so yummy. I just love the honey cocoa flavor in the cookies, and the flavors actually developed more over time. Like when I tried the more cocoa ones fresh from the oven, I couldn't really taste the honey, but after about 2 days, the honey flavor comes through a lot more, where you can really taste the honey cocoa combination. Anyways, get creative and have some fun with your decorations. Follow me on my socials at Cherry Lanes CCC to stay connected. And if you've enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, I'm Cherry Lane. Stay well, everybody.